Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to make plugs. I'm going to go through the process of making plugs. These are 1 1/8 diameter by 2 inches long. If you look, we sand the ends and we put a little bevel on them. And we use these primarily for beds. We build our beds with glue and lag screws, mortise and tenon construction. And this is the plug that we use to hide the lag screw after we've put the bed together. So, first step is to come over here in our cubby. This is where we just store our scrap 2x4s. We're going to make our plugs from these 2x4s. So I'm just going to grab a few 2x. We're going to go over to the rip saw and we're going to rip these into 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square stock pieces for our plugs. The rip saw is kind of like a table saw and a planer combined because it's got a chain, a feed chain that runs when you turn this on, that once you push the material into the machine, it'll grab the wood and take it. So it's very safe from that standpoint. You never want to stand directly behind where you're running your material through. There's always the risk of kickback. You always want to stand beside it. There's a fence here that we can use so we can get a nice straight edge. This piece of equipment is great for putting a straight edge on wood. So the first thing we need to do before we get started, we need to know what's the thickness of the material that we're running through the rip saw. This happens to be 1.5 inches thick. So I'm going to set, there's a setting here. If you see a little handle, I'm going to loosen that handle by turning it counterclockwise. Then I'm going to raise up this wheel till it gets to 1.5 inches, which is the thickness of the 2x4 we're running through. I want to set it actually 1/16 of an inch below the thickness. So I'm going to set it to 1 7/16. That black mark is at 1.5 inches. And then here I'm going to set my fence also to 1.5 inches. Pull back on the handle. There's my 1.5 inch mark. The inside of this fence is what I want to line up at the 1.5 inch mark on my tape. So I'm there, pull forward on the handle. Make sure my blast gate is open. Now I'm ready to run the wood through. Okay, so now we've got our 1.5 inch stock to work with. I like to pick out at least 6 pieces. So we got enough to work on to make it worthwhile. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a plug at each end of this stick. And we're gonna do it with this piece of equipment called the woofer. Basically, it's like a big pencil sharpener. It's pretty neat because what it does, it's adjustable in diameter from 1 inch diameter to 3.5 inch diameter. You can also adjust the length of the tenon. What we're doing is we're creating what we call tenons, which is basically, a round end from a stick or a log, and you're going to plug that log into a hole or that tenon into a hole. So let's come over and take a look at this piece of equipment. The first thing we're going to want to do is make the adjustment to the approximate size of the tenon. Like I said, this is 1 1/8. So we're going to adjust this. There's 2 adjustments here. There's a diameter that goes from the center out from right to left on the left side, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. I wrote on the piece of equipment. So I'm going to pick up my pin and adjust it to the nearest size that we're going to make our tenons at, which is 1 inch. So I'm going to put my pin in at 1 inch. So the other adjustment is the tenon length. When we move away from me, it gets greater. So we're 1 inch tenon length in the corner, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. So right now, where I've got my pin position, we're 1 inch diameter by 1 inch long. And whatever I do to one side, I want to do the same exact thing to the other side. So the other side, we're also going to put it 1 to 1. So if, for instance, I was going to do a 2 inch tenon, 2 inches long, I would come over to the 2 inch mark, and then I'd go back 2 inches. So I'd be right in that spot. So this gets us close. So now I'm at a point where I want to grab my stick, and I want to do a test piece to see how close I am to the actual size. Another method we have for getting real close to our final measurement is by using these spacer blocks up on the wall here. I've got them labeled. Here's the one we need. It's the 1 1/8 by 1 inch long. And what I'm going to do is depress the foot pedal to the floor, and you see there's a gap between these jaws. On each side we have a cutter on the left and the right, and then a shaft that as we push the pedal down, the shaft comes towards us. The space between the two jaws, that's what these spacers are for. So I'm going to come back here on the other end, and I'm going to loosen up this nut, this rectangular nut. And then I'm going to turn this handle, and I'm going to watch the jaws close up as I turn the handle until that spacer just fits in there and it's kind of snug. And that's pretty good. So this gets us even closer to our precise size that we want to be. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn that nut and tighten up that nut against that round piece here that we've got. So now I think I'm real close. Sometimes you have to manually push the shaft back because it tends to want to get stuck. So I'm going to grab my stick and push the shaft back. I'm just going to apply pressure there. Now we're all the way back. Okay, some more things about using this woofer. To actually cut a tenon, I'm going to take my stick, and on the left side here, you see this handle? This is a centering device, which I'm going to put my piece of wood in there, and it's going to grab my stick. So as I grab it, I also want to push forward with my piece of wood up against the shaft till it hits the pin. Then I'm going to let go of the handle. So that should put me in approximate center. Now I'm ready to actually turn the machine on and push down on the foot pedal. And when I do that, the foot pedal's going to come, the shaft's going to come towards me, and it's going to push the piece of wood towards the cutters that are on the left and the right. So as I turn that machine on, push the pedal down to the floor, it's going to make a cut on each side of this piece of wood. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to apply pressure against the shaft with this piece of wood and let it come up. Then I'm going to push down again, and I'm going to rotate it with my hand about, let's say, a 1/12 of a full revolution of a turn. Because what we're trying to do, ultimately, we're trying to create a circle, a round circle. So I'll go ahead and turn this on. I'm going to do it without dust collection, so it's going to build up, but this way you'll be able to hear and see what's going on. So over here on the left-hand side is the switch, the turn-on switch. So I'm going to turn it on. It's going to be noisy. The When I turn it on, the cutters are running. It's very important that we keep our hands outside. We never put our hands inside of the machine while it's running. It seems like a logical thing to say, but it's something you don't want to forget. So I'm going to turn it on right now. Then I'm going to go ahead and show you the process of pushing down on the foot pedal, applying pressure against the shaft, and allowing the cutters to cut all the way through the wood. And then I'm going to rotate and go through that same process and try to create a rhythm as I go all the way around with this stick. So here goes. Okay, so I went all the way around, and here's what I've got. A pretty round circle. So I don't know for sure if that's gonna fit. So I've got sample holes drilled at 1 1/8 that I'm gonna test this with. And I'm gonna see if it fits in that hole. It needs to go in the hole at least 1/4 inch. I should be able to turn it. And that to me seems like a pretty good fit. So now I know that I've got my setting just right, and I can go ahead and continue to make more of these pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and do this again with the other side. So we'll go through the process again. I'm going to push my shaft all the way back to make sure it's out of my way. I'm going to grab my level, my centering handle, and that's grabbing my stick and making sure I'm centered on the shaft. Now I've got pressure on the shaft, so I gotta be always applying pressure against the shaft. Now I'm gonna turn the machine on and go through the process again. If you miss a spot, you can always continue to go around again, because the goal is to get a nice round circle. So the next step in the plug making process is to go over to the chop saw, and we're going to cut the length on them. So at the chop saw, these are to be cut to 2 inches long. So I've got a 2-inch mark right there, and I'm just going to match up my end. And there we go, there's our plug. Usually I'll do several at a time, so I'll grab 3 or 4 sticks at a time and line them up all at once with this 2-inch mark, and I'll make several cuts at one time, but I'm just demonstrating a few plugs at this time. Now let's go over to the edge sander. That's the final step, and we're going to sand the tops and bevel the ends of the plugs. There it is, there's a basic plug. You can see I put a bevel on it, sanded the top, and now it's ready to be stained or waxed or unfinished. And we finish them after they're attached to the bed.